Everybody, welcome back to Working Dad Weekly. Just doing a quick video about Easter eggs. So we've got Easter coming up this weekend, and one tradition I've always found interesting is how we have a bunny that delivers colored eggs to children by hiding them outside for them to find. So I kind of sat down and thought, how did this start? Well, if you look at the history of eggs, in particular associated with Easter, there's a long Christian history of associating the egg with the revival of Jesus on the third day after his crucifixion, with eggs being a symbol of new life, of birth, of potential. Okay, that makes sense. But then you say, well, why do we dye the eggs? Well, you can date that history back to about the 13th century. And during that time, under Catholic faith, during Lent, there were often many foods that people would give up in observance of that religious action and holiday of Lent. Well, what they would do is people at the time would dye and paint eggs so that they could break them open or play with them or do whatever it be at the end of Lent to symbolize their observance of the holiday at the end of Easter. So, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But they would also often paint the eggs red to symbolize the blood of Christ that he shed on the cross. Okay, so we still have another religious theme that continues on. Again, makes sense. But then you look at it, why do we hunt for the eggs? Well, there's many different theories on this. One of the leading ones is that during the 1700s, there was a tradition that the Pennsylvania Dutch established. Children would build nests for them to lay their eggs in, and then search for the eggs that they'd left behind whenever they got up and went hunting for food or whatever it may be. So oyster Hawes eventually became the Easter Bunny, who isn't known for laying eggs because bunnies don't lay eggs, but the tradition of the search and presence for the eggs is what stayed. So while that one particular bird, children would go out and make the nest in the grass for the bird to lay their eggs in and then collect them so they could eat them, those were seen as presents. So then whenever they translated it over to it being a bunny, the bunny was leaving presents for the children in the grass. And since they no longer needed a nest because they weren't putting a nest for birds to lay their eggs into, it was seen as the bunny was putting the eggs in the grass and hiding them for children to find, kind of like a fun game. And you can go all the way back to Martin Luther, the head of the Protestant Reformation. They had an Easter egg hunt during his time, and they would hide eggs for women and children to find. Part of this was to encourage people to come to their church. Part of it was do something nice for the community. But the other piece of it was that during the time there was famine. And so hiding these eggs and all that was a way for them to still give charity without directly giving charity and potentially embarrassing women and children of the time who, were starving or food or didn't have an adequate food supply at home. But then also they could tie it back to biblical teachings about how, the Easter egg still represented the new birth of Christ, and the painting of them is red to represent the blood. So it all does kind of tie in together there from the religious aspect. So I always thought that was very interesting. But the other piece to it that I think is probably the funniest piece is you say, okay, the eggs, well, why do we use plastic eggs today? Well, other than the obvious fact of, they're non-perishable, they're reusable, you can put candy inside of them instead of just being an egg. The funniest thing about how we use the current shape of the plastic Easter egg was that was a container that women's pantyhose used to come in. So women would order pantyhose to wear, and they would come in these little eggs that you'd pop open and pull the pantyhose out of. And then somebody got the idea along the way to start hiding little treats in them and use them for Easter, and it became commercialized, and now we have this gigantic Easter egg business with the plastic Easter eggs that all started with a container to hold women's pantyhose. So, the more you know. Hope you guys enjoyed the little tidbits. Tried to keep it kind of quick. Hope everybody has a wonderful Easter, And this is Nate Stowers with Working Dad Weekly. Have a good day.